You are not your parse. You are not a percentile on FF logs. You are not your rank. You are not some number. Once you start to dip your toes into the more challenging content that Final Fantasy XIV has to offer, whispers of parses aren't far behind. Not in-game, mind you. Speaking about parses in-game would be kind of like shouting out Voldemort's name. You just don't do it. If you talk about parses and DPS within the game chat, well, that's a good way to get yourself a temporary ban. But when you are over voice chat, on a forum, in the comment sections, on Twitter, Reddit, that's an entirely different story. This is where you see the bulk of discussions on DPS, parsing, and rank. So what exactly is this parsing thing? I am sure most who clicked on this already know, but just so that everyone is on the same page, parsing is when you use third-party software to record the in-game battle log. This software is basically a calculator, and it adds up that Pollock painting of information from the battle log, and displays it as glorious graphs, showing the player's DPS, or damage per second, and HPS, or healing per second. This data then can be uploaded to the website fflogs, where math and algorithms are used to compare all the parses against one another, and then players are rewarded with a percentile rank, such as, congratulations, you are in the 99th percentile. So you can compare yourself to other players, get a good idea of how you did and where you stand, maybe even become motivated to try and get a better rank. There is a but coming, but I think that sometimes there's too much emphasis placed on parses and ranks. They are put way up on a pedestal, as if it's the defining attribute to being a good raider. There is more to being a good raider than that. A good raider is more than the sum of their parse. For example, having a good attitude and patience. Raid encounters, they're wiping to the same mechanic over and over again, hours upon hours, and then you get to a new mechanic and repeat that whole process over again until you win. Some boss encounters can take weeks or even months to learn. So it goes a long way being patient with a good attitude. One of the biggest tests of this was P3S, the Phoenix boss. That was this tier's static killer, and I truly believe that because no one in our static ever lost their patience and was able to remain in good spirits the entire time, we didn't break and were able to persevere. Patience and a good attitude really does go a long way. Then there's also learning mechanics and being consistent with them. Every time my static failed to meet an enrage or DPS check, it was because of failing at mechanics. Having a player with a resurrection debuff, that is a huge DPS loss. Mechanics that don't one-shot, they often punish with a huge damage down debuff. Once everyone executed the mechanics correctly, that's when we won. Now, all of that isn't to say that DPS isn't important. In the more challenging content, there are DPS checks and enrage timers to deal with. You have to know your rotation and be very comfortable with it. You have to know your opener, your burst windows, which stats to prioritize, what material to use, what food to use, have your potions ready. It's a lot of stuff, and that's what really gets to me. There are players putting in all that effort. They learned their rotations, practiced and wiped on encounters for many hours, until they finally learned all the mechanics and got that well-deserved victory. And yet, they can still find themselves being put down because of their parse. They are summed up completely by some number on some website that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. A player that cleared an encounter in whatever percentile cleared the same encounter as a player in the 99th percentile. I've looked into all that goes into optimizing for those really high parses, and it's remarkably similar to speedrunning. When you look at those advanced job guides, they get very technical. The skill ceiling to mastering a job is pretty high. There are just so many intricate ways to optimize on your performance. Players actually make Excel spreadsheets to map out the encounters and when to use their abilities and cooldowns for the most optimized performance. That is strikingly like speedrunning. The amount of effort that goes into optimizing a route in order to beat the game as quickly as possible, it's a staggering amount of effort and dedication. But Much like how speedrunning a game is in no way required to beat it, getting those really high parses are also not required. For example, the best of the best are able to speedrun Super Mario Bros. On the Nintendo in 4 minutes and 54 seconds. These players are counting frames at this point to do some of those really precise platforming and tricks that are needed to get such a time. They are so optimized that you have to look at the milliseconds to differentiate them. Could you imagine if the game required anything to that level of play just to beat it? In Final Fantasy XIV, the developers aren't looking at what is theoretically possible and then balancing the tier around that. They aren't thinking, wow, look at what a very small percentage of players are capable of, and designing the enrage timers and DPS checks around that. And thank God for that, because it would make raiding far less accessible. Your choices for what jobs you could play as would be diminished, and the raiding scene would start to wither and decay. And that's not a hypothetical. It happened in World of Warcraft with its latest tier of raiding. The developers at Blizzard, for whatever reason, thought it would be a good idea to balance the raid around world-first raiding guilds. And it basically killed the mythic raiding scene. The numbers of players participating plummeted. They had to go back and nerf the damage of abilities upwards to 90% to try and win back players who just threw their hands up in the air and gave up on raiding. Maybe even gave up on World of Warcraft altogether. Now, you might think with everything I just said that I am completely against parsing, but I'm actually not. I think it's a fine tool, and it's fantastic that the game is designed so that jobs and encounters leave room at the top for players who want to engage with fully optimizing their play. But I also think it was very smart that the developers didn't design encounters around that playstyle. Instead, it's an option. Something you can do if you want to, like speedrunning a game. So if you choose to aim for those types of parses, you can slowly integrate those advanced strategies into your gameplay. It's not an all or nothing type of deal. Like I said previously, my big gripe is that raiders are far too often summed up by their parse, as if it's the only thing that matters. And I think that really sucks. Well, anyways, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I would love to read your thoughts on parsing and continue the conversation in the comments. So please, leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked what you saw, please consider leaving a like and subscribing as well. And until next time, bye!